Hey everyone, here we're going to go through and do some Python review using the lab. And again, I pulled out some of the information just to summarize quickly, but then we'll go ahead and actually do the coding on our virtual machine. So in the first part, we'll look at doing some basic math in our interpreter, and we'll notice the difference. Basically, they give you a table of, what's the operation that you're doing? What does it look like in math? And what does it look like in Python syntax? So just a little different. Couple things are just a little different, right? They're our multiplication, our division, and our exponents. And then we'll look at our Boolean operators. So our greater than, less than, equal to, not equal to, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. And this is how we go ahead and we type them in for Python. We have integers. We'll work with integers, floats, strings, and the Boolean, which I just discussed, which is just where the value is either true or false. So in integers, any whole numbers. Floats are numbers with a decimal value. Strings are characters, letters, numbers, symbols, punctuation. And we'll use the type command to find out what kind of data type it is. One of the things to notice is that we use a double equal here to show equal to instead of a single equal. A single equal sign assigns a value. So we say x equals 3. I've now assigned the value of 3 to x. If I want to try to determine if it's true or false, that something is equal to something else, then we'll use our double equal symbol. And we'll go through that. We'll look at concatenation and typecasting because concatenation doesn't work to join different data types. We need to create lists. We create lists using brackets. So here's an example. We do host names and we create a list of host names for our routers. R1, R2, R3, and our switches, S1, S2. It's kind of funny we tend to use all these same defaults. When we want to reference an item in a list, we'll use the index to do that. So the example here is host names 0. That's that very first value in our list. So the first, the first value in our list, its index number is 0. If we want to get to the last value in the list, we could actually go through and we know that our list is, right, it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we could use an index value of 4. Or we could use an index value of -1 if we, say we don't even know. Like 4 is easy enough, right? But if our list is really long and we want to get to the last value in our list, we can use a -1. We'll look at replacing and deleting an item in the list. We'll do that using our index values. So for example, here we use hostname 0. What's at index 0? R1 is currently at index 0 if we follow this example. We're going to replace R1 with RTR1. So you're going to do a replacement using the index value of the item you want to replace, and you'll delete using the index value of the item you want to delete. So if we do delete or DEL, host names, and then we're going to use the index value. So in this case, if this is 0 and this is 1 and this is 2 and this is 3, we're actually going to delete S1 in the list. We'll create dictionaries using braces. So in this example, the command, we create an IP address. So dictionaries are key value pairs. They're separated by a colon. So in our first example where we use our braces to create our dictionary, our key is R1, our value is its IP address, 10.1.1.1. We use quotes for key values that are strings. To reference, you'll reference the key to get the value. So with our list, we reference the index to get something. If we want to get our value, we're going to reference the key. So in this example, it's not a very big, our dictionary can be much longer than this. It does not have to just be one item, as you'll see. If you remember, some of you remember, I'm sure many of you are much better at Python than I am. So we can have multiple things in our dictionary in this other than this one, but in this case, we just have the one. We want to get the value 10.1.1.1. To do that, we've got to reference the key, which is R1. We can add a key value by setting a value equal to a new key. So we don't have any R2 in our dictionary at this point. So we can do IP address R2 equals and then its IP address. That will create in our dictionary the key value pair of R2 to its IP address of 10.2.2.1. And then we need to know that key value pairs can be all kinds of other data types, right, including lists or dictionaries. So in this example, in an example we use, I think we use router 3 when we go through it in the lab. Let's say R1 doesn't just have one value. It has, or doesn't just have one IP address assigned to it as 3. So in this case, we can create our key value pair with a list. So we say R1 is equal to 10.1.1.1, 10.1.1.2, and 10.1.1.3. So we create a list in there. So it can be all kinds of other data types. The next part is looking at getting some input. We'll look at getting input from the keyboard using the input command. And we'll look at getting input from a file or accessing a file using the open command. We'll look at if statements, elif, for, while. So we'll create some different loops. And we'll use if to create a conditional statement, meaning either true or false. If something is true, or if it's true, do something. If it's false, do something different. My natural vernacular would say if it's false, do something else, but I think that might be confusing with the whole if-else sort of thing. So when there's more than two conditions, we use elif in an if-else function. So we'll go through that. We'll create a for loop to go through a list or to act on a set of values. And lastly, we use while to continue to execute as long as the Boolean expression is true. So when you're doing a while loop, you want to make sure that at some point there's some way to exit that loop, so we're not looping forever. And one thing to remember when we're creating an elif statement, the first matched elif, or I should say when we're creating or configuring a group of elifs inside of an if-else, the first matched elif statement in a list of all the statements, of all the elif statements, is the one that will be evaluated and the other ones will be ignored. So again, you want to put it in the order that you're expecting. Results that you want. So now let's go ahead and look at that. So I'm going to pull over my terminal window, or pull up my terminal window for my virtual machine. As I pulled it over, we're going to go through some of the basics first. So open our terminal window, just double click on it in your VM. The first thing we want to do is find the version of Python that's running. So Python 3 space -V is going to tell me I'm running Python 3.8.5. Now I want to go ahead and start my interactive interpreter in here. So we'll type Python 3. And the first part is just to do some basic math, to see, okay, basic math works. I'm not going to go through, I don't think, all of them. We'll do the +1 first. So if we go 2 + 3, we get the result of 5. Now let's look at the different ones, right? Because in math, we a lot of times use the X for the time symbol. We're going to use the asterisk here. So 2 times 4, we're going to get 8. Instead of the divide symbol, we use our /. So we say 20 divided by 5, we're going to get 4. Or 4.0 to be exact. And then our exponent. So instead of doing the number, or a caret b, so the number caret to the exponent, we're going to use 2 asterisks instead. So instead of doing 3 caret 2, for our Python, we do 3 asterisk asterisk 2, and hit enter, and we get 9. So there's our basic math. Python uses the standard order of operations. So when you're creating things in Python, or math things, keep that in mind. So do some basic printing of a string. And we use the typical hello world. Oh, does everybody use hello world? I feel like we all do. It's the initial thing. So we can just type hello world in our single or double quotes. I'm going to just do it one way. So we'll do hello world in our double quotes. And we could also have typed them in single quotes. That will work just fine. We can also use the print command. So we'll do print parenthesis I need to move my cursor away. Print parenthesis. Oh, quote, hello world, end quote, end parenthesis, hit enter. Still going to print hello world. We're going to use the print command quite a bit. Now to get out of our interactive interpreter, we just hit quit and 2 parentheses and we're done. So now we're going to create a file. So in this course, the labs use Microsoft Visual Studio Code. There's all kinds of other options available out there, but all of your labs here are going to use Visual Studio Code. So we're going to go ahead and use that. I'm going to close this up. We'll open Visual Studio Code, double click it. You might get a welcome screen. We're going to go to File, New File. We can start typing and doing the lab portion in here, even though they tell you to save it right away. Probably doesn't matter if you save at the beginning or the end, but we're going to go ahead and save. And we want to save this in labs, DevNet source. So we're already here. So we're fine, but labs, make sure you're in labs, DevNet source, Python. If you're back here, and just work your way through. And you'll notice you already have a devices.txt file. If you see that, then you're in the right place. Hello, whoops, spell hello correctly. Dash world .py. Don't forget the .py and hit enter. Now let's go ahead and put our code in there. And the first thing we want to do is we want to do the print hello world that we had in the previous step that we did in the interactive interpreter. I just realized I did my hello world with a 0 instead of an, like, with the number 0 instead of an O. That's all right. I'm going to leave it. I'll just have to remember to reference it later as a 0. All right, so print hello world. And notice it gives you, which is the cool thing, it already gives you, right? You start that print command, and we're already getting our parentheses. We start typing in our text in there, we're getting our quotes. Type our text in. It knows to finish it. It's intuitive to say, okay, well, if you had them here, you've got to have them here. Whoops. Don't hit enter there. Don't hit enter when your cursor's there. Go to the end. You don't have to hit enter. I did. So go ahead and save it, and then we'll run it. And then we'll go to run without debugging. And you may have this issue. I'm not freaked out right now. You guys may have this issue on your VM. Likely you will, unless something happened and they updated them between now and when we get started. But we need to do a little update. So we're going to go down here and click. And we're going to go ahead and click here and update. Go ahead and let it install. We didn't do anything wrong with our code. The issue is something changed. Do we need an update? I didn't research on what. I didn't spend the time. I know we need to update, so we're going to go ahead and do that. And we're going to click reload required. And I think we can leave here for now. We've done our updates. Now let's go ahead and try to run. Oh, yeah. I may have to close this out and do it again. We'll go ahead and look. Nope, it did it right. Now with the update, we see down here what we're supposed to be seeing. When we run it, we see hello world. And our first little script ran. For many of you, I know this isn't your first one, but this is a review. It is associate level, so we want to make sure that we're going through all the reviews. Trying to remember things and jog our thoughts. Now we have a command line in here, so we don't necessarily have to go up here. We do a lot from down here now. So we can do Python 3 hello dash hello. Oh, you guys remember? I have to remember to do the 0 because I think I used a 0 instead of an O. Dash world dot py. And again, so now you're in your interpreter down here, and you can just go ahead and start running it. And we ran our program, and we did hello world. We could also open a separate terminal window. Just got to make sure that we use the full path information. And you'll do that in the lab, but we're going to keep going. So our next part is to look at integers, float strings, and Boolean types. We're actually just going to verify our types. So we're going to stay down here. We're going to open up Python in our interpreter. So Python 3. You know you have it open by your 3 little arrows here. type, and the number. This is a full number, right? So it's, or a whole number, sorry. So it should come back as an integer, and it does. It tells us it's an integer. If we do a type 98 point, wow, that wasn't close. 98.6, and hit enter. This should come back as what? This should come back as a float because there's a decimal in it. And we could do the type high, and it tells us it's a string. And lastly, type true should tell us it's Boolean, right? And it does. So now we go through our different types. Our integers, our floats, our strings, our booleans that we talked about earlier. The next part is to look at the different operators. The Boolean operators, right? They only provide us with true or false. Is it true? Is it not true? So the first one is 1 less than 2. Is 1 less than 2? Should come back with true. Is 1 less than 1? Should come back with false. Is 1 equal? Remember we use two equal symbols when we want to find out if something's equal. Is 1 equal to 1? It should come back with true. 1 greater than or equal to 1. And if this is, I understand this is pretty fundamental. If it is, you could always run the video faster or skip through this section. We should get greater than or equal means that it's true because it's equal, right? 1 less than or equal to 1 should also come back as true. So we go through our different operators. Now we want to use the interpreter to create and use a variable. So remember I said a single equal sign assigns a value to a variable. So that's what we want to go ahead and do now. So we're going to say x equals 3. So now x is 3. What's x times 5? We lost my asterisk already. X times 5 is 15. Now we can also do a string times x. It's a little different. So we're going to do Cisco as a string times x. Whoops. Wow, that's cool. It's going to display Cisco 3 times. Remember, because our value of x is 3, we set our string of Cisco times 3. So it displays the word Cisco 3 times. And we'll look at concatenating multiple string variables. And then I think after that, we're going to do some typecasting. So let's create some strings. So we do str1 equals Cisco. str2 equals networking. Pretty creative, I know. str3 equals academy. And then we're also going to create a space string to put a space in there. So space equals, right? We'll do our quotes and then a space and then our quote or end quote. Hit enter. Now let's string them together or concatenate them. So we'll do print str1 plus space plus str2 plus space plus str3. So we created our strings. We created 3 strings: Cisco, Networking Academy. Put a string, a space. We also created a space variable. Now we're going to print string 1 and then a space, string 2, then a space, and string 3, then a space. We should get Cisco Networking Academy with spaces in between. Another, I think easier in this case for sure, way to do this without the space, without having to have the space variable, is to do print str1, comma, str2, comma, str3, and our end parentheses, hit enter, and we'll get the same result. So now we look at typecasting. So converting between data types is called typecasting. We need to do it in order to work with different data types. Specifically, concatenation doesn't work when joining different data types. So we'll start with a value that's an integer, and then we want to try to combine a string with a value, and it's not going to let us do that. So we've got to see what we've got to do differently to make that work. So the first thing is x equals 3 again. Print, then our string, the value of x is, and then our end parentheses, and we want to concatenate it with x. Let's make sure I typed in everything correctly without print. See, I didn't. Print the value of x is, so that's nice, that's our string, plus x. So what we're hoping to get out of this is the value of x is 3. When we hit enter, we see that that doesn't work. Because concatenate, those are two different values, right? We have a string, or two different data types, I should say. We have a string first, and then we have an integer. And that doesn't work. So we're going to go ahead and typecast that. So now let's do print. Let's fix this, basically, so that this will work. Actually, let's hit the up arrow first. So we only have to change a few things. So hit the up arrow to get back our stuff, but in front of x, we want to put str and a beginning and end parenthesis. So the value of x is now a string of x. So now we get the value of x is 3. We can't just leave x the way it is, like this, because that's a string and an integer, and it won't work with our concatenation. And if we go ahead and look, our type x is still an integer. So if we want to change that data type or reassign it, or if we want to change the data type, we have to reassign the value to the new data type. So x equals str x. All right, so now we say x is the string x. Now if we look at it, it should be a string. So if we check our type with the type parenthesis x parenthesis, we should get the class is now a string. Now we may have a specific, and they actually give you pi, which is kind of nice, where we have a float value, but we only want a particular number of decimal places. So in that case, we're going to go ahead and use f strings in the format function. So we get our number first. Num equals 22 divided by 7. Okay. And then f, so to do this then, so we have f, and our string, the value of num is, and then our braces we put num. Okay. So the value of num is num, whoops, that's not a brace. So num is 22 divided by 7. Then we start this portion with, because we're using f strings in the format function, we start this portion with f, and then our string, the value of num is, right? And then our braces and our variable here of num, and then end it with another quote, or end quote, and hit enter. So the value of num is a really long number. We don't want it to be that long. In this case, we're going to only go out 2 decimal points. So pi equals, right, so we use the format function here. Pi equals, quote, brace, not bracket, brace, colon, dot 2f, end brace, dot format, and then our parenthesis and num, because we're formatting the num value to only have two decimals. Oh, I typed something wrong. What did I forget, guys? Oh, jeez. Forgot my end. There we go. End quotes. So pi equals, and then our brace, our colon, our dot, our 2, our f. I'm just trying to make sure I did this right. End brace. I'm forgetting things. You start typing stuff, and then format num. That should work. Hit enter. Okay, now we've got to use this value, pi. So we'll use our f string again. Okay, f, whoops. F quote, the value of pi is, and then our variable pi. So brace, pi, brace. Dot, and our end quote. So f, the value of pi, well, goodness gracious. The value of pi is, and then our value of pi. And so now this time we get the value of pi as 3.14 instead of earlier. We can actually move this up a little bit. Instead of earlier, the super long number for num. This number here is the number of decimal places. So if you want to go out 3, you would replace that with a 3. If you want to go out with 4, you replace that with a 4, and so on. So now we got to start with creating lists and doing things with lists. So remember, when we create a list, we use brackets to enclose items in the list. We're going to create a list of host names. Alright, so host names, and this is what I talked about in the little PowerPoint section. Host names equals our first bracket and our first host name, R1. We surround each of our names in the list, or each of our things in the list in this case, with our quotes, comma, quote R2, end quote, comma, quote R3, end quote, and we'll keep doing that. Now we gotta do S1 and S2. And we end our list with our closing bracket and hit enter. What is type? We want to find out the type. Let's see if we did it correctly. Host name. So type host name. And we see that it's a list. So we're doing pretty good. What's the length of our list? We do len host name. Close host name in parentheses, hit enter. So we have 5 items in our list. What are they? So if we want to print out those items, we just type host names. We just type the name of the list. Oh, you know what? I also realized, see, I get a little off because I know what I want to do, and I don't. In your lab, it says host names, but I only typed host name. So if I want to find out what's in my list then is actually called host name without an S. So if I want to find out what it is, I just got to type host name and hit enter. And I get all the items in my list. Now I want to find out what the first item is. What do I got to do? I got to reference the index of that first item. And the first item in a list, the index number is always 0. So host name and bracket 0 bracket. Whoops. Didn't spell host name correctly. Try that again. Hit enter. And the first item in the list is R1. You want to find out what the last item in the list is? What do you got to do? We could either, because we know our list is small, we could go 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And we could reference 4, but specifically to find out the last item, we want to use -1. Especially if our list is really long. So starting bracket, -1, closing bracket, hit enter. The last item in our list is S2. Now let's change the value of the first item in our list. So we don't want the first item to be R1 anymore. We want it to be router1 or RTR1. So we'll do host name. And the index, remember, we do things, we manipulate items in a list by using their index. So host name 0, in order to manipulate the first item in the host name list, we're going to change it. So equals, and then our beginning quote, RTR1. We're going to change it to RTR1. So we're going to take this first item R1 and change it to RTR1. And we do that by calling its index number. Hit enter. And then we go ahead and show our list again, show the items in our list, and we should see that the first one's RTR1. Now the first one, instead of being R1, is RTR1. And go ahead and delete items also by calling their index. So in this case, we're going to delete the third index, so 0, 1, 2, 3. So we're going to delete S1 from our list. So DLE host name bracket 3 bracket, because that's the index number of S1. Again, hit enter, and let's print it again by hitting host name. We can see that S1 is gone from the list. So now we've created and manipulated a list. Our next step is to create and manipulate a dictionary. So to create a dictionary is a set of key value pairs. To create a dictionary, we use braces instead. So in this instance, we're going to create routers, or we have routers. We're going to assign them addresses in our dictionary. So IP address will be the name, equals beginning brace, quote, R1, that's our key, and then our colon, because what separates our key value pairs is a colon, and then the IP address of 10.0, whoops, yeah, 10.1.1.1. Okay, so this is our first item in our dictionary. Our first key value pair is R1 and its IP address of 10.1.1.1. Put a comma in there to put our next item in the list. We'll do R2, colon, and R2's address is going to be 10.2.2.1. Okay, so we have two key value pairs so far, the R1 with its address and R2 with its address. And another comma will create R3, and then that'll be it for right now. R3, whoops, R3, colon, 10.3, whoop, .3.3.1. We'll end that. We'll end with our last brace, our closing brace. We have our dictionary called IP address. And in that we have three key value pairs, R1 to its address, R2 to its address, and R3 to its address. Hit enter. Let's double check our type. So if we do a type, IP address, hit enter, it tells us it's the dictionary. So we did well. We're doing well so far. We don't reference things in our dictionary with our index number. If we want to get a value, we're going to reference the key. All right, so the first thing is, let's see our list, or let's see our dictionary, sorry. Let's see what's in our dictionary by typing the name of our dictionary, which is IP address. We can see all the key value pairs in it. Now, I just want to get the value of R1. So I type IP address, and then a brace, R1, whoops. Our single quote, God darn it. So IP address, quote R1 quote, or single quote, our end brace, and hit enter. That gives us back the value that's assigned to the R1 key. Now you'll add a new key value pair by just creating a new one. Right? So set a new key equal to a value that's going to add to our dictionary. So we'll do IP address and our bracket. We're going to create S1. So S1's our key, and we're going to set that equal to the value of 10.1.1.10. So here's our syntax for adding S1 to our IP address dictionary with a value of 10.1.10. And hit enter. Now let's go ahead and double check our list and see if it added S1. So IP address and hit enter. And we can see that we added our key value pair, our key of S1 and its address. So the last part in here is just that we want to go over that key value pairs can be all kinds of data types, including lists and dictionaries. In this case, we're going to create a list. We're going to say that R3 has multiple IP addresses. So we're going to use a list to indicate the value of R3's key. So IP address and R3. So IP address, bracket, quotes, R3 quote, bracket, equals, and now our list. So we use a bracket for that again, right? 10.3.3.1. We surround it with our quotes, comma, 10.3.3.2, surround it with our quotes, comma, and last we do 10.3.3.3. 10.3.3.3, and then end with our last bracket, hit enter. So now if you type IP address, R3 should have 3 of them. And it does. So we still have R1 and R2 the way they were, but now R3, the key R3 has 3 different values. We used a list in this case. So that's it for this section. I'm going to stop this one here and we'll do a second part.